The year was 1867, and the desert carried the smell of dust, mesquite, and death. Ethan Cole sat alone on the porch of his ranch house, a rifle across his knees, staring at the horizon as the sun bled red into the jagged ridges. He hadn't spoken a kind word to another soul in months. Grief had stripped him bare. The fever had taken his wife and little boy in a single week, leaving the ranch cold, half lived in, and falling to ruin. He thought he was past caring if the land swallowed him whole. But then came the sound. At first, it was distant, like thunder rolling across the basin. Then sharper, drums, whoops, a war cry that sent the horses thrashing in their corral. Ethan rose in a single motion, cocked a Winchester, and pressed his back against the wooden post of the porch. His heart hammered. Apache. The word was a curse in every rancher's mouth. And now they were here, swarming. He didn't wait. He swung the rifle up, set his cheek to the stock, and aimed into the growing shadow. A line of riders swept over the ridge, 50 at least, painted in the last fire of sunset, horses snorting steam. They came like a wave, yet not toward the house. They slowed, spread out, and hemmed the barn in on every side. Ethan stood motionless. This was no raid. They could have shot him 10 times over before he drew a breath. From the center rode a man taller than the rest, shoulders draped in a buffalo hide mantle. His hair was streaked with gray, his gaze steady as stone. Ethan knew the name whispered even in saloons. Nantan, war chief of the Apache bands. The man's eyes settled on him with the weight of judgment. "You are Ethan Cole," Nantan said, his English gravel thick. Ethan gripped the rifle tighter. "That's right. You remember, long ago, a boy in the dry wash. You could have killed him. You did not." Ethan's brow furrowed. A half-memory came. Years earlier, when his herd was small, he'd stumbled on an Apache youth wounded, bloody from a skirmish. He hadn't shot the boy. He'd turned him loose. A decision forgotten, until now. Nantan lifted his hand, and 2 figures stepped forward from the mounted ranks. Ethan's gut tightened. They were women, but not like any women he had ever seen. Both towered a head above him, shoulders broad as men's, their frames wrapped in buckskin stitched with bright beads. One's face was calm, unreadable, her long black hair hanging straight like a river at night. The other's jaw was sharp, eyes blazing with defiance, arms corded with muscle. They filled the barn doorway like giants stepping out of the earth. Nantan spoke, his voice a verdict. "You spared one of ours. Now 2 are given to you. You will be their husband. They will be your strength." The word struck Ethan like a hammer. He choked out, "What?" The riders gave no further explanation. Nantan raised his hand, turned his horse, and the Apaches wheeled as one. Within breaths they were gone, dust and hoofbeats rolling back across the horizon. The barn door creaked in the silence that followed. The 2 women stood there, watching him, waiting. Ethan lowered his rifle, shaking his head. Not in God's name, not in this lifetime. But they didn't move. The taller one, quiet-eyed, walked past it without a word and lifted a fallen fence rail, as if it weighed no more than straw. The fiery one smirked at Ethan, her voice sharp with accented English. "You are husband now, whether you want or not." Ethan stood rooted, rage and disbelief colliding in his chest. His ranch, his grief, his life, they had been claimed by giants. Morning came harsh and bright. The desert sun painted the land in merciless gold. Ethan woke to the sound of chopping. He grabbed his rifle and stormed out, ready to drive him off. What he found stopped him cold. The quiet one, Saka, swung an axe into a mesquite log, each blow sinking deep, piles of wood already stacked at her side. The fiery one, Tea, held a rope tied around a wild horse, her bare feet dug into the dirt, her body like iron. The stallion reared, screaming. She yanked hard, brought the beast down, and forced it to the ground with ferocity that made Ethan's breath catch. "Stop that," he barked. Neither stopped. Saka didn't look up, only split another log clean. Taya shot him a grin, wild and daring. "We work. You watch." The word stung. His pride flared. "This is my ranch. You don't belong here." Taya spat into the dirt. "Without us, you are nothing but bones." The fire in her eyes rattled him. Ethan cursed under his breath and stormed off, but as the days rolled, the truth gnawed at him. The corral mended, the barn roof patched, fields cleared of stone. His ranch, once on the edge of ruin, began to breathe again, and everywhere he looked, the sisters' shadows fell across the work. But the town saw it too. When Ethan rode into Oak Creek for supplies, whispers followed him. Men leaned close in doorways. A drunk muttered loud enough for all to hear, "There goes the Apache husband." Laughter cut through the dusty street. Ethan's fist clenched, but he kept walking. At the mercantile, the shopkeeper narrowed his eyes. "Ain't serving savages." He spat on the floor. Ethan left with empty hands, fury boiling. By week's end, trouble came closer. A gang of drifters crept in under moonlight, thinking to drive off cattle. Ethan heard the lowing, the shuffle of hooves. He rose from his cot, rifle ready, and stalked into the dark. Shadows shifted at the corral. He aimed breath-tight. Before he fired, a scream ripped the night. Taya charged first, swinging a branding iron lit red from the coals. The iron smashed into a thief's face. He dropped like a felled steer. Sokka moved silent as stone, her hands gripping a man's throat until he collapsed, gasping. Ethan fired then, the Winchester cracking like thunder. A drifter spun, fell into the dirt. Chaos broke loose, shouts, curses, gun smoke. Ethan fought like a man cornered, the sisters at his sides like walls of muscle and fury. The drifters broke and ran, leaving blood and hoofprints behind. Breathless, Ethan looked at the women. Their chests heaved, eyes gleaming in firelight. He realized with shock they had fought for him, for his ranch, and for the first time since fever had gutted his world, Ethan wondered if he was not cursed, but spared. Word of the fight spread faster than prairie fire. The next day the sheriff rode out, dust clinging to his duster, badge gleaming dull. He found Ethan mending the corral with Sokka lifting rails beside him like they were reeds. "Cole," the sheriff said, his tone heavy, "you've stirred up a hornet's nest. Town's talking. They don't like Apaches here, let alone you playing husband." Ethan bristled. "I didn't choose this." "Doesn't matter. Trouble's coming. Whites don't want it, and some Apaches don't either. You're marked now." The sheriff tipped his hat, rode off, leaving dust and warning behind. That night the air hung thick. Ethan sat by the fire, his shoulder cut from the scuffle, aching deep. Sokka came to him quietly, knelt without asking, and pressed a poultice of herbs to his wound. Her touch was firm but gentle, her dark eyes steady on his. No words passed, but something stirred, a recognition of grief meeting grief. Across the fire, Taya snorted. "You think you can send us back? You're full already. The chief's gift cannot be returned. And now, whether you like or not, you stand with us or you fall alone." Her laughter was sharp, bitter, but it was truth. Ethan turned toward the barn. The sister silhouettes filled the doorway, immense, unmovable, like spirits rooted in his land. Beyond them, storm clouds brewed over the desert, lightning flickering silent in the distance. Ethan whispered into the fire, moored himself into them. "God, help me!" The flame snapped back, as if mocking. The night pressed in, heavy with promises of blood and storm. And so began the strangest chapter of Ethan Cole's life. Husband to giants, marked by a chief's decree, bound to a fate he neither wanted nor yet understood. The desert did not forget. Days bled into weeks, and Ethan Cole felt the land shift beneath his boots. Where once silence and decay had ruled his ranch, now there was motion, the sound of axes biting wood, horses breaking under strong hands, and voices not his own filling the emptiness. The two sisters were everywhere. Sokka moved with quiet purpose, her face a mask of calm even when sweat glistened on her brow. She built fences, carried water, turned soil with a strength that would shame 3 men. Taya was different, fiery, restless, quick with her words and quicker with her temper. She laughed at Ethan's orders, called him stubborn, and worked harder still when defiance blazed in her. But while the ranch gained new life, the outside world grew darker. Ethan rode into Oak Creek one morning for supplies, feeling eyes burn into him before he dismounted. Whispers followed him through the street. Apache husband. The words slithered like snakes. Two cowhands snorted, loud enough for all to hear. Reckon he sleeps under buckskin now. Laughter cracked like whips. At the mercantile, the shopkeeper crossed his arms and blocked the shelves. Ain't serving a man who feeds savages. Ethan's jaw tightened. He wanted to put a fist to the man's smug face, but he turned and left empty-handed. Pride stinging worse than hunger. The sister saw his anger when he returned. Taya asked no questions, only sneered. They spit at you because of us. She leaned on the corral rail, eyes sharp. Send us back, if your skin is too soft for shame. Ethan bristled. I didn't ask for you, but you're here, and I won't let this ranch rot again. Sokka only watched him, silent as a desert sky, as if measuring him against a weight he could not see. At night, when coyotes yipped in the hills, Ethan found himself staring into flames, remembering his wife's touch, his boy's laughter. Both gone. Yet across the fire sat Sokka, her face still and solemn, or Taya, restless, firelight flickering in her eyes. He told himself they were strangers, but he could not deny the pull of their presence. The trouble came swift, as it always did in the West. A week after Oak Creek spat Ethan out, he woke to the smell of smoke. He ran barefoot into the yard, rifle in hand, and froze. The corral blazed. Flames licked at the posts, cattle screamed, hoofs pounded the earth in panic. Men's shadows darted through the firelight. Ranchers, white men, faces twisted with hate, torches in hand. Send the squaws back, Cole, one shouted. This land's for whites, not savages. Ethan fired into the air, voice raw. Get off my land. But they came anyway. The cattle surged. Sokka rushed into the smoke, her arms wrapping around a calf, dragging it clear while flames singed her dress. Taya leapt with a scream, swinging a shovel into a man's gut, dropping him where he stood. Another swung a club at Ethan. He ducked, rammed the rifle stock into the man's jaw, bone crunching. The fight was madness. Sparks rained down, smoke choked the air. Ethan's world shrank to fists, fire, and the roar of beasts. He caught glimpses, the glint of a knife, Taya driving her knee into a man's chest, Sokka shoving cattle through a gap in the fence with sheer brute force. A hand caught Ethan's collar. He spun, felt the burn of a blade graze his ribs, and fired point-blank. The man dropped, blood spreading black under firelight. Ethan staggered, coughing, his shirt damp with sweat and smoke. By the time the flames died and the last man fled limping into the night, the corral was half ruined, cattle scattered into the dark. Taya stood panting, blood streaking her arm, her eyes bright with fury. Sokka's hair was singed, her face streaked with ash, but she stood steady, silent as stone. The sheriff arrived hours later, lantern in hand, his men trailing behind. He took in the blackened corral, the bodies still lying where they fell. His voice was grave. Cole, you're in deeper than you know. The town wants you gone. Men are riled up. You've picked your side now. Ethan clenched his fists. I didn't pick anything. The sheriff shook his head. Don't matter. It's picked you. As he rode away, Ethan felt the truth settle like a noose around his neck. The sisters weren't just on his land. They were in his blood now, for better or worse. Restless and heavy with anger, Ethan saddled his horse 2 nights later and rode into the hills. The desert stretched vast and merciless, stars hard and cold above. He pushed the mare until dawn stained the sky pink and gold. When he reached the Apache camp, spears glinted in the light, warriors watching with unreadable eyes. Nantan stepped forward. The great chief wrapped in furs, so the air was hot. His gaze was the same as before, hard, measuring, certain. Ethan dismounted, spitting dust. Take them back. I never asked for this. They'll get me killed. The chief's lips twitched into something that might have been a smile. You speak like a child afraid of a shadow. You think them curse. They are gift. You do not see yet. Ethan's voice broke sharp. Gift? They brought fire and blood to my door. Nanton's eyes flashed. The day will come when you beg them to stay. You will not survive without their strength. The words hung heavy in the desert air. Ethan turned, seething, but no more was said. He rode away, the weight of prophecy clinging to him. When he crested the ridge above his ranch, Smoke rose again, this time darker, blacker, not from the corral but from the barn itself. His gut clenched cold. He spurred the mare hard. Gunfire cracked across the yard. Shouts, curses, cattleballing. A gang of whites had returned, fiercer, more desperate. His barn was under siege. He saw Sokka's massive frame at the doorway, a club in her hands, swinging like a storm. Taya screamed as she struck with a pitchfork, her hair wild, her body a blur of rage. Ethan's blood surged. He yanked the rifle from his saddle scabbard, teeth bared. His voice tore free in a raw roar. He charged. The battle for his home had begun. The first bullet shattered the night, sparking against the barn's timber frame. Ethan Cole ducked behind his horse, teeth clenched, rifle tight in his hands. Smoke curled from the roof where flames had already taken hold, casting the yard in a hellish glow. Shadows of armed men moved fast, their shouts raw and hungry for blood. From a barn doorway, Sokka roared like a wounded bear, her massive body blocking the way. A club whistled in her hands, breaking bone with each swing. One attacker lunged. She knocked him aside as though he were straw. Her dress was torn, her hair wild, but her eyes burned steady as coals. Taya fought just beyond, pitchfork flashing, her strikes fierce and reckless. She screamed curses in English and Apache both, her voice cracking the night like thunder. She moved like fury itself, a storm given flesh. Ethan burst from cover, raised a Winchester, and fired. The shot tore through the dark, dropping a man who had leveled his revolver at Sokka. Another came at him from the side, knife flashing. Ethan swung the rifle stock hard, cracked the man's skull, and shoved him into the dirt. The yard became a blur of fists, fire, and gun smoke. Horses shrieked. Cattle rammed at the fence. The barn moaned under flame. Ethan's lungs burned with every breath of smoke. His arms ached from the weight of survival. He fought because he had to, because if he stopped, everything left of his world would vanish. Through the chaos, he saw Sokka stumble. A gun flashed, and she jerked back, clutching her side. Ethan's heart stopped. He fired blind into the dark, dropping the shooter. He ran to her, dragged her inside the barn, and laid her against a bale of hay. Blood soaked her dress, hot against his hands. Her lips trembled, her voice low. "We are not Curs," she whispered. "We are your wall." The words hit him harder than any blow. His throat closed. He gripped her hand, shaking his head. "Don't you leave me now. Not you." Outside, Taya screamed. The sound of rage and despair mingled. Ethan rose, rage boiling. He stormed back into the yard, rifle ready. Taya stood in the open, blood streaking her arms, swinging until her body shook with exhaustion. For a moment, Ethan thought she would break. Instead, she raised her head, eyes blazing, and charged. Ethan fired beside her, covering her wild fury with precision. Every shot, every strike, drove the attackers back. The yard filled with the groans of the wounded, the curses of men breaking under resistance they had not expected. Slowly, like a tide turning, the gang faltered. Those who could still stand fled into the night, leaving only silence, fire crackle, and the harsh rasp of survivor's breath. When the last rider vanished over the ridge, Ethan dropped to his knees, chest heaving. The barn smoldered. The corral lay broken and bodies littered the dirt. But he was alive. They were alive. Taya staggered him, her face smeared with soot and blood. For once, her voice broke soft. "You fought with us." Ethan looked at her, his jaw trembling, words thick. "No, I fought because of you." The truth of it sank deep. He returned inside, cradled Sokka's head in his lap, pressing cloth to her wound. She stirred faintly, eyes half closed. Ethan bent low, whispered fiercely, "You hear me? You don't get to leave me. Not now. Not ever." For the first time in months, Ethan Cole felt the weight of his grief lift. Not because the dead were forgotten, but because the living had fought to stand at his side. Dawn crept slow and gray over the horizon, light spilling across a ranch broken yet unbowed. Smoke hung heavy, drifting from the barn's scarred frame. Ash coated the yard where men had bled and fallen. Ethan stood in the wreckage, hat low, rifle slung across his back. His eyes were hollow but steady. The sheriff rode in with 2 deputies, their faces drawn. They saw the carnage, the broken bodies dragged to the fence line. One deputy swore under his breath. The sheriff dismounted, boots crunching in blood-stained dirt. "You fought off 20 men," he said flatly. Ethan's jaw flexed. "With their help." He nodded to the sisters, Sokka pale but sitting upright against the barn wall, Taya leaning near her, arms crossed, eyes daring anyone to speak against them. The sheriff's gaze moved between them, unreadable. Word spread. Some will spit on your name. Others will call you the toughest man in the territory. But know this, what you did here changes things. You ain't just Ethan Cole anymore. Ethan's throat tightened. Then what am I? The sheriff's eyes flicked to the sisters. The Apache husband. And whether you like it or not, that name will stick. The words landed heavy, not as an insult, but as a truth carved into stone. Ethan looked at Sokka, then Taya. He saw not the burden he once cursed, but the strength that had kept him standing when his world should have crumbled. When the sheriff left, dust trailing, silence returned. Ethan walked back to the sisters. He crouched, met Sokka's gaze. "You said you were my wall. Maybe that's true, but walls hold more than a man. They hold a home, and maybe a family." His voice broke at the word. Taya scoffed, though her voice was softer than ever before. "You speak like you claim us." Ethan shook his head. "No, I stand with you. That's different." For the first time since she had stepped onto his land, Taya's fire wavered. Her lip trembled, eyes wet though she blinked it away. She looked at her sister, then back at Ethan. No words came, but her silence spoke more than her taunts ever had. As the sun climbed, another rider approached. Nantan. The Apache Chief dismounted slow, surveying the yard, the charred barn, the battered defenders. He stepped forward, his gaze fixed on Ethan. "You see now," Nantan said, his voice calm but heavy. "Strength is not in guns alone. It is in those who stand with you." Ethan met his eyes, steady. "I thought you cursed me, but you gave me life back." The chief inclined his head. A man is not measured by what he owns, but by what he protects. He turned, mounted, and rode away without another word, leaving the truth hanging in the warm desert air. Ethan stood tall, his shoulders squared, his chest full for the first time in years. He no longer fought the title. He was their husband, not by Apache law, not by town gossip, but by the bond forged in fire, blood, and survival. The sisters moved beside him, their shadows stretching long across the ruined yard. Together they looked toward the horizon, where dust and storm might rise again. The West was not done with them. But Ethan Cole was no longer a man waiting to die. He was a man who had found his wall, his strength, his family. And in the legend of the frontier, his name would not be forgotten.